And welcome back to the show. Our next guest is a native New Yorker who spent her career serving the people of the West Bronx. As a council member, she currently serves in her second and final terms representing the 16th District of the Bronx. People ask, what is the 16th District? Well, that includes Claremont, Claremont Village, Concourse, Concourse Village, Highbridge, Mount Eden, Morrisania, and Morris Heights communities. She's been a leader in several areas, particularly education, affordable housing, criminal justice reform, public safety issues, and an advocate for alternatives to incarceration, as well as tenant protection and increased training for our police officers. Joining us now, we have the New York City Council member of District 16, Vanessa Gibson. And Councilmember Gibson, good to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Daren. I hope you guys are good. Thank you.
We are. And share with us, as we are really moving now out of this COVID crisis a little bit further. We're not out of the woods yet. A lot of people are still concerned about the fact of when we come out, the potential for possibly homelessness and affordable housing. Give us a little bit of your perspective on how you see things.
Yes, thank you so much. So we've worked incredibly hard over the past year. When we were first hit with COVID-19, this pandemic that no one knew what it was, and it really turned our worlds upside down. We had heightened food insecurity. We had soaring unemployment. Many of our residents lost their job, their income. Many who are rent burdened were further burdened because they paid over 30% of their income towards rent. And we put a lot of measures in place, both at a local, state, and federal level to prevent evictions from families being forced out of their homes because of non-payment of rent cases. And we try to support homeowners and property owners and really provide a lot of relief to small businesses who also saw their revenue decimated. They had to close their doors. Many of them just struggled to survive. So as we are on the cusp of returning to normalcy and dealing with just COVID recovery, as well as the access to the vaccination, we know that a lot of the moratoriums are eventually going to be lifted. The eviction moratorium that comes to mind that has been put in by the state of New York will expire at the end of August. And we believe that there are a little over 30,000 evictions that are pending in housing court in New York City. And many of those residents we know live in the Bronx. Many of them are on a fixed income. They are families of color, they're immigrant families, and they're older residents. We cannot allow them to be evicted, and communities, we have to do everything we can to provide stability, to keep a roof over their head, and to expand any opportunities that will keep them in their homes. So the eviction moratorium, if we're going to talk about expanding it and extending the time frame, we also need to make sure we promote programs like the rental assistance program that's being offered by the state of New York that provides a level of rental assistance for those families that are behind their rent and face rent arrears.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about the whole COVID-19 pandemic. It's been very much the focus of how we're trying to navigate out of and into a better place. And when we talk about homelessness, then we also talk about food insecurity. I remember one time we had the opportunity to talk to you. You were out there, boots on the ground in the field, really trying to make sure that people got fed. How do you assess the food insecurity in the borough, as well as more particularly in your district?
It's been heartbreaking, Daren. Over the past year, as I've been out, many other elected officials, we work with organizations like Fresh Direct, Common Pantry. We've worked with ICNA Relief. We've worked with Fresh Direct, as I mentioned, and Food Bank and City Harvest, God's Love We Deliver. We work with so many of our community partners to expedite funding in the city council. We expedited about $25 million last year to many of our food pantry and soup kitchen providers because we saw longer lines. Food has been more expensive at supermarkets because the distributors are charging more for products. And so it's really hard early on to get access to basic food, to healthy food. It was really hard to get cleaning supplies, as you know, and toilet tissue and hand towel and things of that nature. So we've been working with our community partners in giving them the resources they need, programs like EFAP and HIPNAP, which is city and state programs that provide funding for many of our food pantry providers. We've tried to expedite a lot of that money from the city so that we had the ability to address a growing capacity. Longer lines and more families in need, you simply had to do the very best you can. There were organizations like World Central Kitchen that were giving out prepared meals, Eat Clean Bro, many organizations on the ground. And even now, a year later, Daren, you wouldn't believe that there are still families in need. We've been talking about universal healthy food. We've been talking about programs like the Fresh program, Health Bucks, making farming and urban agriculture more accessible in our communities, focusing on community gardens and green thumbs, and making sure that we have farmers and green markets all year round, because we fully believe that we have to expand on these existing programs and offer them more in communities that are food deserts, that don't have access to supermarkets and Whole Foods and Trader Joe's and all the other stores that are not accessible in our borough. And we also have to make healthy food reachable and convenient for people. It has to be affordable, because oftentimes it's not affordable. We have to look at programs like the EBT program and SNAP benefits and make sure that those can reach our families, and many of them that have school-age children. The Get Food NYC program that's available at local schools, that's now offering halal and kosher meal options, culturally sensitive meals for families. We have to make sure that we expand on all of that. We've spent millions and millions of dollars, and a lot of that is reimbursable by the federal government, but we know that even a year later, we still have a lot more work to do.
Yeah, a lot of work needs to be done in our community, and obviously, you're right there at the thick of it. I want to talk a little bit more about some of the other things that we deal with in our community, which is police community relations. We know that about this time last year, we were all reeling with the death of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and after, subsequently, of course, we know now the conviction of Derek Chauvin in the death of George Floyd. And before and now, calls for police reform. I know you've been working very hard. You've worked on the Public Safety Committee. Talk to us about, how do you see police reform playing out in a better way?
Last year was a tough year. When we all witnessed the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis last May, it was devastating, because as Black Americans, we have seen far too much violence by police officers across the country. We've heard of the stories of the Eric Garner and, Ahmaud Arbery and Tatiana Jefferson and Breonna Taylor, and so many names that we continuously call out. These are brothers and sisters who have been killed by police violence across the country and right here in our very own city. But I think the murder of George Floyd highlighted the systemic racism that we've been facing for over 400 years in this country. And it really highlighted racism in America. And yes, we have to continue to look at law enforcement in terms of changing the behavior, holding those bad officers accountable that engage in misconduct and excessive use of force. But we also know we have to support law enforcement in the best way we can. We have to support the good officers, the men and women of the NYPD that go to work every day, that don't set out to choke anyone or use excessive force. They just want to return home the same way they left. Just like civilians, we want to return. The gun violence and the plague that we've seen, a 10-year-old killed in Far Rockaway over the weekend, is devastating, and it's not normal. And I've been a part of too many mourning mothers and fathers, too many funerals that I've had to attend and help to facilitate, and it's heartbreaking. We want to launch Safe Summer 2021. We want to have restorative justice, alternatives to incarceration. We want to have police reform. We want to work with our NCOs and our youth coordination officers. We want to make sure that officers are following the rules and the guidelines, but we also know that it's not just police officers that mean safety. We have to look at our neighborhood institutions. We have to look at structure. We have to look at lighting, and we have to look at our corners and make sure that every place is safe for seniors, for elders. People do not feel safe in this city. They have seen crime increasing. There are shootings, stabbings, assaults on Asian Americans and Jewish New Yorkers, and people are very worried about this summer. They're worried about walking down the street in safety and being able to return home safely. And so, yes, we need police officers, but we also need more on anti-gun violence, the Cure Violence program. We need more about crisis intervention, violence interrupters. We need mediators. We need to deal with the root causes of why young people engage in violence in the first place. Let's talk about jobs and safe spaces and community centers and hubs and programs like Compass, Sonic, Beacon, Cornerstone, after-school programs. Let's talk about mental health and therapeutic services, programs like Saturday Night Lights. We need to get these young people into programs, into trades. They need to be productive, right? They need something to do with their time. And we have to focus on this summer because it's hot. People don't want to be in the house. They want to go to parks. They want to have fun and recreate. And we want them to do that. We just want them to be safe. We have to address the proliferation of illegal handguns in our communities. This is a state of emergency, Daren. This is a national crisis. We need to address it from a healthcare perspective. We need a declaration by President Biden that gun violence is a health crisis, and we need a state of emergency.
Yeah, and give me a little bit about this, because when you talk about what we need stuff, we need more resources pretty much. And we know that there's been that the defund the police movement. Some people say, listen, I'm not for defunding in as much as I'm for reallocating. Where are you on that, and how do you approach that?
Well, last year during the budget, when we had the defund NYPD movement, Black Lives Matter demonstrations across the city, we were able in the adopted budget to transfer $1 billion of expense funding from the NYPD that paid for summer youth and Compass, Sonic, Beacon, Cornerstone programs. It paid for healthcare, social services, but we know that's not enough. Last year's budget was unlike any other I've experienced in my 8 years in the council. We had a $9 billion deficit. We lost $7 billion in revenue due to the pandemic, and we had no money from Albany and no money from the federal government. And we had to make some tough choices. This year is different. The adopted budget in Albany did not cut the city of New York. It gave us more money for education, anti-gun violence initiatives, more program for social services and education and healthcare. And because of the American Rescue Plan, we got $7 billion in New York City over 2 fiscal years that's going to help us address a lot of programs, restoring money to the sanitation, to get 7-day-a-week service, including corner and litter basket pickups, which we desperately need because our streets are not clean the way they could be. We also want to restore money to the Parks Department and get more money for park officers, PEP officers, playground associates. We want more park ambassadors. We want more slots for summer youth this year. We want after school. We want Compass slots, which are middle school daycare slots for our young people in middle school. All of these things we're able to look at now in a real transformative way because we do have more money this year. We're not facing a budget deficit. There will be no talks about layoffs of city workers, which we're grateful for, but we also have to make sure that we put the money where our commitment is. If we want to save young people and give them access and opportunity, we want to provide programs for youth, for seniors, for veterans, for LGBTQIA New Yorkers, for our elders and our veterans, then we have to be about it. We have to demonstrate it through this budget that we're gonna pass in a few weeks. We have to make sure we focus on programs like Single Shepherd, fair student funding, CUNY ASAP. We need to look at our CUNY students as well. Everybody has struggled and been traumatized, Daren. So when you talk about COVID relief and COVID recovery, it is wraparound services for children, families, and all New Yorkers that need it.
Take the time for a minute and share with us. We know that you are a candidate for Bronx Borough President and you are in the run and in the hunt. Talk to us about your decision as to why you decided that you wanted to run for Bronx Borough President.
Well, over a year ago, before the pandemic hit, I knew that I wanted to continue to serve my community in some way. I knew I would be term limited out of the city council at the end of 2021, and I wanted to use my experience on budget. I know how to get things done. I know how to deliver. I know how the city budget works. I've been all over the capital process as well as discretionary process. And I also have 4 years of experience as a state elected official in the New York State Assembly. I'm the only candidate in the race that has state experience and city experience. And I wanted to apply all of that to be the next Bronx Borough President. I want to make sure we have a borough hall for all residents of the Bronx, no matter where you live, no matter what block you represent, what zip code you live in. We want to make sure that we address so many systemic issues that the Bronx historically has faced: underemployment, poverty, lack of access, poor health care, asthma rates through the roof, health disparities, soaring unemployment. We were doing incredible work before the pandemic hit. Our unemployment went down to 6.5%. Thanks to the leadership of Ruben Diaz Jr. and his team. But now we're back in double digits. So our campaign is Forward Together Bronx, and we want to be the leader that will allow the Bronx to emerge from this crisis healthier and stronger than ever before. We want to focus on jobs and economic development, access and opportunity. We want to build economic wealth and power in the Bronx. We want ownership opportunities, affordable housing, access to quality and affordable and low-cost healthcare, and we want to address public education and invest in our students, address the digital divide so that all students have access to community schools and guidance counselors and social workers and nurses, because every child is gifted and talented, and all they need is access because they are our leaders that are ordained for success. And we want to focus on open space, parks and recreation, greening the Bronx. We want to make sure that Bronx residents get everything they rightfully deserve: had an incredible amount of support from labor unions, from DC 37, UFT, CSA, 1199, 32BJ, doctors, teachers, nurses. We've been working very, very much around the clock, talking to voters, knocking on doors, and really reminding them that we know that challenging times are ahead, but we need leaders who are driven, who are dedicated and committed to the cause, who have a plan of action, the passion to get this work done, and really the purpose to serve.
Are you optimistic as we are winding down?
Always, always full of hope, Daren. You have to be full of hope. I've had so much happen to me in my life. The past couple of weeks have been so challenging. I lost my political mother in Aurelia Green, and that broke my heart. And last week, I lost my grandmother to COVID in Trinidad, and I am still standing. I'm still smiling. I'm still praising God because he allows me to wake up every day. And as long as I wake up every day, as long as I have breath in my body, I will serve the residents of the Bronx with every fiber in my being to the very best of my ability.
Vanessa Gibson, thank you so much for being with us, council member. And again, our condolences to you for your loss, and certainly we'll be prayerful for you as well as your family. Talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Daren, and thank you, BronxNet, for always making sure that you talk to the people and you voice the concerns of the borough of the Bronx. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Vanessa Gibson here on the Social Justice Forums.